My name is Mrs. Cook, for those of you that don't know who I am. And I want to thank all of you who are joining us online, as well as those who are attending in person. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that can be a little challenging for everybody to think about, to talk about, and to learn about. And so I just want to warn everyone who's listening, if you are triggered by discussions of suicide, then that is something that you should take with discretion, this conversation that we're about to have. But we are going to go into a lot of the risk factors related to what can increase someone's likelihood of having suicidal thoughts or taking action on those suicidal thoughts. And then we're also going to discuss ways to prevent. So we're going to kind of cover a broad range of topics. Speaking of, we'll talk about myths and misconceptions. We'll get some warning signs. We'll talk about an open-minded approach to if someone approaches you and wants to talk about the thoughts or feelings that they're having related to suicide. How do you handle that? What do you do in that situation, especially when it's a child? It can be very jarring and challenging to hear those words come out of a young person's mouth, especially when it is someone that you love and care about deeply. And so mentally preparing yourself for those tough conversations is the best way to be prepared for yourself, but also for that person who's communicating that challenge with you. And speaking of communication, we want to build positive communication so that that person is willing to come in and let us know what they're going through. How to find support, and then at the end we'll close with some additional resources for everybody to do their own further research. All right. So it is a fact that suicide rates in our country have been on the rise, particularly in the last 2 to 3 years. Now we know we just went through a pandemic that obviously increased a lot of awareness of the mental health gaps in our country as far as treatment, and still the stigma that prevents people from wanting to get that help and support that they really need. But there are some small things that we can do to reduce the risk of death by suicide for our own children, our own communities, and part of that is just being open to the idea of talking about it. There's a stigma still, even in 2023, around suicide and discussions of suicide, and so if we can kind of break through that stigma and start to have a better understanding of some of the things that can affect somebody enough to put them in a place where they may feel that their life is no longer worth living, or some factors that may help prevent them from getting to that place, then all the better for us and for our community. So there are some myths about suicide that I want to address, and one of those is that if we talk about it, it will encourage someone to try it. Like we're putting the idea in their head. And statistically, and based on all the studies and research that we have, the opposite is true. If you speak directly to somebody about their thoughts or feelings related to suicide, it actually acts as a deterrent. Some people think it doesn't really affect that many people, and I think a reason that some people have that misconception is that people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about suicide because it's a tough topic, and so people think, oh, it doesn't really affect that many people, but it actually affects more people than you would think. It's actually the leading cause of death among school-aged youth. So it's definitely something that affects more people than we think. Youth suicide only affects certain socioeconomic groups. That is a myth. It affects all socioeconomic groups, all walks of life, all levels of income, and all areas of socioeconomic ranges are affected by suicide. And suicide happens without warning. Although it may feel sometimes like it was a sudden action that someone took, there are many, many signs that, if you know what to look for, do indicate typically that someone is at that point before they take action on those thoughts. All right, so we're gonna hear from a doctor being interviewed by this gentleman, and she's gonna talk a little bit more about suicidal thoughts from a medical perspective. I gotta restart the video though. Sorry guys. We'll just try this. Oh, there we go. All right.
someone is just thinking about suicide, does that mean they're actually suicidal?
So what I would say is that thoughts about ending your life are always serious and should be taken seriously. And so if you or anyone that you know is having those kind of thoughts, it's really important to reach out to a trusted adult. That might be telling a parent, their parents, someone at school, or their doctor, if you're worried that they are having those thoughts and might do something about that. Just thinking about suicide in a more general way doesn't always mean that they're actually thinking of ending their life. Now, suicidal thoughts can happen for a number of reasons. It might happen from a medical illness, medication that they're taking, or a life event and a stressful reaction to that's going on. Just because someone is thinking about suicide or maybe having thoughts of ending their life doesn't mean that they have to go into the hospital, but it just might mean that they need to work with an adult to get a safety plan in place and make sure that they can keep themselves safe and work through whatever's going on to cause those thoughts.
Okay, so that video was published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and again, it's really tough to think about this in the context of our kids, but unfortunately, especially with social media and things like that, they have a lot more knowledge than we sometimes even think or realize that they do. So us as parents and adults in the community being informed, as educators, whatever role we play, it's important because they probably already know more about it than we think. All right, so the warning signs and risk factors, and Dr. Megan kind of went into it a little bit in that video, but there's oftentimes an underlying mental health concern, such as depression or another disorder, or a substance use disorder that can be impacting the thoughts of suicide. Also, people can be genetically predisposed to having suicidal thoughts if members of their family have experienced those. Any significant life event like losing a loved one, a big loss in another way, like the loss of a job or career, getting out of jail or prison, can be other reasons. Also, the access to lethal means of suicide, like weapons in the home, can also increase the risk that there is suicidality. The warning signs are often exhibited in ways that are verbal, so someone talking about wanting to die, someone saying there's no reason for them to live, making statements like, my family would be better off without the trouble that I caused them. So it doesn't always necessarily come out in a phrase like, I am suicidal, or I am having suicidal thoughts. Sometimes we have to kind of read between the lines of some of that hopelessness and helplessness that they're communicating. If someone feels like there's no way out, they're trapped, or if they feel like their life has no meaning or purpose, those are signs that they may be on a path towards suicidality. Also, sometimes their actions, so this bullet point here, for those of you that are watching with us online, is taking great risks that could lead to death, such as driving extremely fast, so an increase in risky behaviors that could lead to death, or acting like nothing matters, or they don't care about anything. Those are all signs that there may be some sort of issue happening, and at the very least, we should just be checking in at that point. All right, so when we go from the warning signs to the serious warning signs, when does it become really like, this is, DEFCON 5, we need to make some phone calls and we need to get some immediate help. Extreme mood swings, making plans, writing, goodbye notes, getting rid of their stuff in a way that is abnormal. Big changes in their eating or their sleeping, showing a lot of anger, talking about, things that have been done against them and that they need to get revenge on people that have hurt them. Those are all types of things that could be signs that the risk is increasing now. So I just want to take a pause and take a moment, because I know that a lot of us have gone through where we've experienced maybe a family member or a close friend having these struggles. And so I just want to check in with yourself, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, taking some deep breaths, and just refocusing on remembering that we're here to educate so that we can help others through their experiences. And if you need to take a break, please take a break at any point in time. Okay, so once we've kind of identified the things that we're looking for, the signs that someone may be at risk of having some suicidal thoughts, especially even in our kids, let's find ways to talk about it, because it can be a really challenging thing to discuss. And I also, just like last time, have some fun little handouts. So this is actually from a brochure called Frequently Asked Questions About Suicide. So in that first paper in your packet, it just talks about some basic information. So kind of what I already went through. What is it? What are the warning signs? What treatment options are available? And then it talks about what should I do if I'm struggling or someone else is struggling. And so that's kind of where we're at now. So the first step is to talk about it. If someone approaches you to talk about their thoughts of suicide, the first thing that you have to do as a listener is set aside your own feelings. It can be really tough, especially when it's a child coming to you saying things that are very scary and you're worried about them. But the most important thing is to maintain control of your reaction, because if you start freaking out, they're gonna start freaking out. And if they think that it disappointed you in some way, or that they have said the wrong thing, that's gonna probably prevent them from wanting to share further or again. And that could be the difference between them surviving and having a serious incident. So we wanna remain calm. We don't wanna judge. I know that a lot of times as parents we think, oh, your problems are nothing. You just wait till you have bills to pay and jobs to maintain and a house to keep up with and kids to watch. I mean, you have no idea how tough your life is right now. It's nothing. We have that perspective as adults who have lived a full life. They don't have that perspective. So those feelings that they have, that like, this is the most important thing in my life right now and it's ruined, it's over, those are real for them. So we have to be able to validate those feelings and put aside our own judgments. And then taking a break. You know, I really want to hear what you have to say, but I just need a moment. Please excuse me, I need to use the bathroom. If you're feeling like you're getting to that place where you can't keep it cool and keep it together, take a step back, take some breaths, get yourself refocused, and if you need to, seek out someone who maybe can keep a more level head and bring them into that conversation. Listen non-judgmentally. Again, we don't want to project that judgment or shut down that conversation, because that's their cry for help right there. And then asking follow-up questions when appropriate is always a great way to show someone that you're listening, especially in this kind of situation. Being direct. So research shows that if you kind of try to step around the issue, well, how do you feel right now? Are you okay? What's going on? It's really ineffective. If you ask direct questions, are you feeling suicidal? Have you had thoughts of wanting to die? Do you wish you were not born? Those types of direct questions are the most effective at preventing suicide. So how often do you have those thoughts is a really great question. Do you know where those thoughts are coming from? What triggers that thought for you? If you want to get that in depth, you absolutely can. It's all about what you feel comfortable with and what they feel comfortable with and how safe you are in that situation. So reassuring them and acting them, I kind of put together, because while you're taking action, while you're seeking those resources or supports, you're reassuring that person, that child, that you are there for them, that you love them, and that you want them here. So you're going to do everything you can to support them and give them the tools that they need to be successful in working through these feelings and thoughts. Connecting them with a professional, a mental health professional, or if the risk is very high, obviously bringing them to a facility that can assess their risk and then take the appropriate measures from there. So that one can be tough, but there are other steps you can take too beyond just jumping to that. Removing any sort of dangerous objects from the area, getting things out of sight, locking things up. Those are all really important steps that you can take as part of that action. All right. So here, this is just kind of a nice little infographic to talk about some of the things that I just went through. So I put that up there for the good of kind of looking at it and seeing it. This is found on the National Institute of Mental Health's website, which is www.nimh.nih.gov. And that is also listed at the end, so if you wanted to check that out some more, it is available to you. All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the protective factors or the ways that we decrease that risk before we even get to that point. So having a positive mental health at home, asking questions to your kids, not just like, how was your day today? Because we know we get the cookie cutter answer. It was fine. It was good. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, well that's not helpful. If I can't engage you in conversation, then asking 100 questions is not going to do anything. So asking questions about things that matter to them. How is your friend so-and-so that I remember you talking to me about the other day? How was that test that you were studying for last night? So remembering things that are meaningful to them and asking them specific questions about those things are really helpful. Or maybe even, how did lunch go? What did you guys have today at lunch? Like, I know it seems silly, but it shows that you're not just generalizing some questions and asking them to check it off the list. It shows that you're actually listening and paying attention. Which is my next point, listening to our kids. Sometimes, and I get wrapped up in this too, you know, I'm thinking about cooking a dinner, I'm thinking about what chores do I need to get done, I'm thinking about did I feed the rabbit, you know, and all these things. And I talk to my kids without really listening to them. And so taking a pause, getting on their level, getting face to face, and hearing them without distractions, putting the phone down, turning the TV off, you know, all those things that are pulling at our attention and just being present in the moment with them does so much for their mental health and also for our mental health too, having those meaningful human connections. Remembering the things that matter to them and then asking them about it later. Like I said before, as part of that asking step too. Engaging, sharing your interests and experiences with your child as a means to try to connect to them, and then also doing things that they like. My daughter likes Roblox. I don't know if anyone else has a kid that plays Roblox, but I watch her play, and she's 13, and I'm like, this is really boring, and I don't, well, there are 100 other things I could be doing right now, but it's so important to her. Mom, you have to see this game, it's so cool. Okay, and I think to myself, you know what? I'm just glad that she wants me to be involved. So I will take those 10 minutes that I could be doing 100 other things, and I will be thankful that she's asking me to be part of that with her. As hard as it can be sometimes, I think it's really important. And then responding. Watching how we react and respond to what our kids say. This can be very tough. We approach a lot of their conversation from an adult perspective because we are adults. But sometimes kids are saying something, and if we're not listening and we're not paying attention, we're not focused in, we miss what they're actually saying. I have a great example. My mom just came into town this last weekend. We celebrated her birthday. We went and did a little mini trip with my kids during the day. But at one point, my daughter, my little one, she's 3.5, she was telling my mom this story. And what she does is she strings together these random phrases and she makes it sound like it's a story, but it has nothing to do with itself. There's no plot. But she's doing this with my mom, and my mom is just, oh, okay, yeah, okay. And then all of a sudden, she throws in this phrase, I'm a bad daughter. And my mom gets real serious. And she's like, no, oh no, you're not a bad daughter. Sometimes you make bad choices, but just because somebody makes bad choices doesn't mean they're a bad person. And I mean, my mom went into it with her, right? And a few minutes later, after my daughter had moved on to the next thing, I kind of pulled my mom aside. I said, Mom, that's a quote from the Elemental movie that just came out. I'm a bad daughter. We just watched it last night. I don't know if you remember that part, but that's what she was talking about. And my mom was just like, oh, okay. So while I appreciate that she was trying to use it as a teaching moment, she totally missed it, right? Like totally went over her head. So sometimes just knowing what they're talking about can be a challenge because we don't always know exactly what they're talking about, but asking those follow-up questions. Where did you hear that phrase from? Oh, okay. Instead of, having a big reaction or getting upset or getting angry because they said something. giving them a chance to explain or asking those questions, or maybe they said they're repeating something that they don't really understand what they're saying, and then they need guidance and counseling to direct them into like what that actually means, or explaining it in a way that they understand and that's appropriate, and then telling them maybe that's not the best way to say what you're trying to say. But if they're afraid of our reactions as their parents, that's going to shut down that communication, and then we're going to lose that opportunity to guide them through those really tough challenges when they do come up. All right, here's another little video, and I'm going to caveat this before I play it, because this video talks about substance abuse, and this is from the National Council for Mental Well-Being, and this is protective factors for substance abuse, but they're the same. The protective factors for suicide prevention and for substance use have a lot of crossover. So what I've done is I've typed out specifically from the CDC and the National Council for Wellbeing the tips on suicide prevention, but if you'll notice, it aligns almost exactly with what the little video talks about. So even when they say, substance use can be prevented by, we're really thinking of it as suicidal thoughts can be prevented by.
A number of different factors, some biological or psychological, others social or environmental, give youth greater protection from or increased risk of substance use. Effective substance use prevention focuses on strengthening protective factors and reducing risk factors. Protective factors are the characteristics of individuals, families, or communities that support resilience, help youth more effectively manage stressful events, and strengthen other characteristics that minimize the risk of substance use. They can include things like participation in structured after-school activities, supportive family relationships, and positive self-esteem. Every youth is different, and the protective factors present in their lives can influence what messages are most effective in preventing substance use. Dig deeper into protective and risk factors for youth substance use prevention and how they can be used for messaging at thenationalcouncil.org/gettingcandid.
All right. And I think one of the lines there at the end, or kind of middle to end of that video, talks about how each youth is different. And I think that's super, super important. If we're trying to create things that are preventative and individualized to a person, we have to know that person, and we have to know what matters to them. And we have to cater those things to that individual. So one person's preventative factors may look different than another person's based on their beliefs, their experiences, what values they have, and that's okay. There's no one right way to create a plan or to make a preventative plan. It's dependent on the person. All right, in the little handout that I passed out, there is what we call in the biz a safety plan. So this is what mental health professionals will use if someone has shown signs or expressed thoughts of suicide and they are at risk for harming themselves or taking action on those thoughts. This is just kind of a guideline for parents to kind of go through and fill in the blank. So know when to get help. What are the warning signs that you're beginning to struggle? For some people, it may be stress related to schoolwork or friends or family responsibilities, right? But stress is a big factor a lot of times for people. Having a relationship issue, maybe they lost a friend, or a lot of times in middle school and high school there's lots of drama, and so that could be something that makes them feel unsafe. So thoughts, feelings, behaviors, anything that would be considered a trigger or a risk for them getting to that place, they would fill in that top blank. Then there's coping skills. What do you do to take your mind off the problem? If you're feeling stressed, how do you de-stress yourself? And that gets them talking. So like for some people, music is a great tool to manage those feelings. For some people, they just want quiet. They just want a quiet, dark room where they can decompress by themselves. Okay, great. Some people like to read. Some people like to go for a walk, physical activity. So it's really, again, very personal to whoever is creating this plan. There's no one right answer. And then what are some obstacles? So for example, if you like to take a walk to de-stress and you start getting stressed at school and class, You might not be able to just get up and go take a walk like you would at home. So what is another activity or an alternative thing that you can do? So being mindful of those things, because those thoughts can come up wherever you are, and you may not have access to that preferred method of decompressing. And then reaching out to your social group, and that goes into these protective factors. So the number one common thread in all of these protective factors is connection. Community, relationships, family, having a sense of belonging and a sense of I am a part of something bigger than myself. So those social interactions, those healthy people in our lives that provide us support are super, super important to someone, especially if they're going through thoughts of suicide. Okay. So connection prevents suicide, and resilience starts with connection. We can't have resilient kids if we're not connecting with them, if we're not connecting them to supports, and if we're not engaging them in things that are going to improve and provide for their mental health rather than drain and make them feel like they are always failing. If you feel like you're always failing, it's no wonder where you might start to question if your life has meaning. So we have to give them opportunities to connect and opportunities to succeed and to shine. And so when we can do that, that's when we really have won the battle. The final three pieces that I have in the handout here are just three great articles about how to talk to your child about suicide. This first one is an age by age guide. So for those of you that are like, my kid's too young to even know about this, that may be true. But there are some tips from a psychologist about how to approach the subject from different age ranges. And the youngest age range in here is 7 to 10. Young children, so earlier than 7. There are ways to talk about things, keeping it simple and general, but there are ways to talk about it. And so that's a great article. Talking with your child about suicide, this is from Children's Health. And they go through some really great facts. And then signs of depression and warning signs specifically in children and teens, they go into that. And then how to talk to your kids about suicide. This one's a little bit longer, but it breaks it down into a step-by-step guide, which I really liked as well. So I included all three of those in that packet for those in-person learners. So those are just some, ancillary readings that you can take some time with after. And then I also have here on the last slide some additional resources. So for those of you that are like, I never knew this topic was so in-depth and there was so much research involved in ways of prevention and how to see the signs. These are some great websites that go over those risk factors, that go a little bit deeper into the information. And if you know someone who is struggling, or you yourself have ever struggled or are struggling with thoughts of suicide, please reach out to the Suicide Lifeline help. It is 988. That is, you can dial that from any phone, anytime, anywhere, and you will get immediate support. And that is all that I have for you. So thank you guys, those of you that joined us online. I really appreciate your presence. I'm sorry you missed out on the food here, but maybe next time you'll be able to join us in person. Thank you.